My name is Dennis Glendenning. I live in Houston, Texas now. I grew up here on Oahu, and I grew up in Aiea, Pearl City. I was a Navy brat. Father was a Navy SEAL, and by the time I was 13, was basically homeless and was living on the beaches. So when I was 15, I ran into my father, and he came back from one of his trips to Vietnam and Thailand, and he was moving there permanently. So he made the mistake of asking me if I wanted to go, and I said yes. So I went and cut all my hair off because I was a little North Shore hippie back then. This was back in '69. The world was very different, and I lived on Kualoa Ranch, which is, I guess, where they make all the movies now. I lived in that valley, and when I wasn't living on all the beaches, and so I just basically lived from Ka'ava to Kahuku and different beach parks, and but it was so different back then because you go into little communities like in Punaluu, and nobody locked their doors, and you would just go from house to house, and they would bring you in, feed you. And I had long hair, was a little white haole hippie boy that everybody knew, and but nobody knew my name, nobody knew anything about me, and they just accepted you. And so that's how I spent my teenage years till I was 15. And when I went to Bangkok, everything changed. As in '71, Bangkok was still during the Vietnam War, and we weren't very popular over there. So I spent a lot of time dodging bullets and trying not to get killed. And I worked the door of my father's girlfriend's bar in the red light district of Bangkok when I was 15. And had to do a lot of things that weren't so nice. But then I found out he had another girlfriend whose husband worked for Air America. And all these people are gone now, so I can say these things. But when I found out that she was pretty wealthy, I got some money from her and got a ticket and got out of there. Came back home. And I knew Vinny from, and he had the house in Kailua before I went to Bangkok. And I ran into him again. I was back about 2 months, and everybody found out how old I was, and they wouldn't hire me anymore. I couldn't work. So I was getting kind of hungry. Things weren't working out so well, and times were changing, and it was the '70s now. And I ran into Vinny again, and I was kind of guided to coming over here. And I was pretty burned out, and I had lost a lot of weight. And anyway, I ended up coming out here to this facility, and I found out they were out here, and people were bringing me out here and going through the induction phase. I didn't really realize that's what I was going through. They didn't tell me that. I had no concept of what was going on. And so the facility had the induction office right over here on the property. And it turned out that there were several people in the program already that I had known, but I didn't know they were in here. So there was some problem because they didn't know why I was coming around. They thought maybe I was coming to mess with people or to try to pull them out, or they didn't know me. And I didn't know these people were in here. So I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't know what was going on. I was just an idiot, 16-year-old idiot. I was so baked, I was just gone. And I would just sit there and stare at them like, whatever. And finally, after 2 weeks, it took 2 weeks, I had to keep coming back every day. But people kept bringing me back here every day, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. I mean, you're talking about from the 60s, so I had taken so much stuff, I was just fried. And after living in Bangkok for almost a year, I was pretty much toast. So, but because I was only 16 and didn't have any money, I couldn't really hurt myself too bad. So I just survived on whatever people gave me. And in the 60s, that was quite a bit. So that was my sob story. And then they ended up interviewing me, and I found myself in the interview screaming and yelling for help, and for Vinny, talking to Vinny. Actually, no, Vinny wasn't in there because he was in the hospital. And he called from the hospital and told him to take my hair to buy me some time, I guess. And that was pretty normal back then for certain people. But he didn't know I had already taken my own hair because he hadn't seen me since I got back from Bangkok. I ran into all his people. They were going around, induction people, I guess they were. At that time, I didn't really figure out that's what it was, but that's what it was. So they're the ones that arranged for me to come out here and go through the interview process and all that. So back then, we had just come on, it was like March of '72. And it was pretty new. It was like jungle. There were koi ponds and carp ponds and duck ponds. And I spent many, many weeks and months cleaning and painting duck ponds and carp ponds and fish ponds. And as you worked. When you got up, they wake you up. The expediter come around and wake you up in the morning, and you don't go back to bed for 18 hours, and you work, or you were in the games, or you were doing something. And wasn't a whole lot of free time. And it was good, because as soon as we got any free time, we just screwed it up. So I mean, we had all the old school junkies in there at that time, and they were doing whatever they could think of doing, and nobody knew it until they got caught, and then they were gone. And all my mentors and all my, I watched them crash and burn and just do stupid stuff. And I realized pretty fast that I had to figure out what I was doing. I wasn't completely stupid. And once I got the fog lifted and understood where I was and why I was here, it took about 6 months. I actually didn't really talk to anybody for about 6 months that I remember. And I wasn't all that friendly anyway. I mean, I wasn't real warm and fuzzy kind of guy. I never was. So I didn't make a whole lot of friends real fast. And that kind of slowed me down, I'm sure. But the fact that I was just a homeless 16-year-old hippie from North Shore, I wasn't a junkie, I wasn't from prison, I wasn't Italian, I wasn't from the East Coast, I wasn't in any category except this little hippie kid that a couple of people in here knew from the street. And I had been homeless for quite a while. And but once I figured out that, because I keep watching, I watch and I learn, I wasn't coming back through here again. That was not going to happen. And I just made up my mind. And I think that's what most people really have to do. You just have to make up your mind that you're not going to fuck up anymore. And then you have to figure out how to do that. But if you don't make up your mind, then the rest of it is just an exercise. You might pick up some stuff, you might learn some words, and you might be able to fool some people, but you're never going to fool yourself if you don't make up your mind to do it and just leave the rest of that shit behind you. and come up with a reason to do what you're supposed to do after you leave here. And I'll never forget this guy that came out. I can't remember his name, but it was one of Vinny's buddies, one of his mentors. And people used to come to the facility, and we'd sit in the room and watch and listen. And I never really got a lot of that. I was a kid, stupid. I didn't know how to listen. So, but I tried. So what I would do, and there was a couple of us that would do this, you know, we'd corner these guys on the property away from everybody else. And we thought we had, you know, the best questions. And I just, you know, we just asked them, you know, what do you do? I mean, you don't know how to ask. You don't know what you're trying to find out. And I remember just asking them, how do you make that change? How do you go from this to that? And he told me, and I remember reading this in Emerson's essays on self-reliance, because I think Synanon was the first TC, and it's based on that essay. All the concepts are in there. And he told all of us, I mean, we were just sitting around drinking coffee, and he says, you know, you just have to work. You put your head down, you work your ass off, and stop chasing whatever it is you're chasing. If you're chasing, looking for a girl, a woman, stop chasing it. If you chase something that runs, and you just stop. You put all your energy into what you're supposed to be doing, all your work, and do as good a job as you can do, and put all your concentration into it and all your effort, and then one day you look up and it'll be right in front of you. That girl that you've been looking for will be standing right there. That situation you've been looking for will be right in front of you. And I thought, I can do that. So it made sense to me. All the concepts and all of the speeches and all of the, you know, I listened, but I couldn't make the connection. I never could. How do you use this out there? And that's the connection I could never make. And it was hard for me because I was an idiot. I was 16 years old. I didn't know shit. So I didn't have much of life experience except I knew how to live on the beach. I could survive, but I wasn't doing such a good job of that when I came in here. So I had to rethink that. And you know, the world was changing. It wasn't the 60s anymore. And I wasn't this long-haired hippie kid that everybody fed when I was living on North Shore. It was just, you know, I pretty much look like I look now. And I haven't changed a whole lot. But so I had to figure out how to do that. And then, you know, you get challenges because you get out and you try to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And all you can do is stick to the basics. If you get work and you find out, you know, you're lucky to find something you like to do. If you do that, you know, I was never clinical, so this wasn't going to be for me. You can probably tell from the way I'm speaking, I'm not a salesperson. So that was, you know, I used to sell Christmas trees door to door. That was the best, closest I ever came. And I hated that. It was like getting waterboarded or something. It was just like the worst thing you could do to me is send me door to door to sell Christmas trees. So, and so I got out, and first thing that happens is I break my back. My back broke in 1976. I was driving the truck and picking up stuff and bringing it to the facility. It was what I did all day long. My back went out, and they had to fuse 3 vertebrae together and take out 2 discs, and I was in a body cast, and doctor telling me I can't do physical labor anymore.
Oh, you were here?
Yes, I was here. And nobody knew what to say to me. Now what do you do? I was graduated. I had a job that I liked. I've been through mechanic school. Me and Bob Thrapp and Willie Ferrera went to mechanic school. And so I was working on the vehicles and driving the truck and dispatching, and I was happy. And then that happened. So, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm in a hospital room by myself. And I'm at home by myself in a body cast. And, you know, nobody knows what to say. Nobody knows. They don't want to look at you. You know, it's in a body cast. I lost 40 pounds. So I had to rethink all of that. And I ended up with 2 surgeries. My first kid was born while I was in a body cast. And I ended up working for an air freight company, a little air freight company. I went to Maui, ran the terminal, and I got recruited from there to go to work for Tenneco Oil Company in Texas in 1980. And I came back once in '87. That's the last time I was here. So basically, for the last 13 years, well, I was a retail supervisor for 18 years. I had 8, 9 stores, had 90 people working for me for 18 years. And I used to talk to Vinny because this is retail. It's all cash business, and this is in the, you know, the 80s and 90s. And all I ended up doing, 90% of my job was catching people stealing. That's what I did, and putting them in jail. And that was a retail supervisor back in the 70s and 80s. And you know, back in there, you could do a lot of things back then you can't do now. If somebody stole from me, I would go to their apartment and get it back. You can't do that now. And so I was a perfect candidate for them. I didn't have any problem doing any of that stuff. And I knew how to catch people stealing because there wasn't anything you could steal that I hadn't already stolen. So it was a natural for me. So I ended up spending 3 years in Dallas, 3 years in New Orleans, and 3 years in Denver with Tenneco. They gave me territories, and they would always stick me out in the boonies because I was a mechanic. I could fix everything myself. You know, it was like, man. So then I ended up, I just got tired of doing that. You never knew when the phone was going to ring, if somebody was shot, somebody was robbed, you know, whatever was going to happen. So I ended up going to manufacturing, and I became a manufacturing engineer. I got my degree. I went to school at night, and I got my bachelor's degree in business management. And while I was a technician, I used to build life science instruments and test them for applied biosystems. And what's really funny though, when I first got recruited for Tenneco back in '80, and we flew, I sold everything we owned, we flew to Texas, to Houston. And the guy goes, we have to give you a polygraph. This was in 1980, we're still doing pre-appointment polygraphs. The guy that recruited me didn't know anything about my history. I said, you gotta be kidding me. A polygraph, what are they gonna ask me? Oh, you know, the regular stuff. What's the regular stuff? And that's everything. Questions are, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? I mean, wide open. And you had to answer all these questions. And I had this list, pages of stuff, because they would answer specifically. Have you ever done this drug? Have you ever done that drug? Have you ever stolen? Have you ever... So I had to, and you had to be honest, because what happened was, they had to get it down to where you can answer yes or no. Because that's a pre-employment interview. So you do this interview where they ask you all these questions, and you get all this stuff out in the open so they can form a question that has a yes or no answer. And before they ever hooked me up to the machine, the guy left the room and went and got the guy that recruited me. And I had just flown here from Hawaii, or flown to Texas from Hawaii with my wife and son to work for him. And he didn't know anything about that. And he showed him these 3 pages of stuff. And the only question the guy had when he came back in was, He couldn't figure out, because then they did the thing. They did the yes or no. Because what I said was, from March 27th, 1972, everything was yes. After March 27th, 1972, everything is no. And every question was the same. And all the details, and they just didn't believe me. So they hooked me up and they did the test. And the guy and he tried everything. He tried everything to trip me up. They do this thing called stemming, where they ask you some really bad questions that will get a reaction out of you, really personal stuff. And everything went perfect. You know, he couldn't get me to lie about anything. Couldn't show a lie. So when he was done, he said, you know, I just don't understand how you can say that you did all of this stuff right up until March 27, 1972, because I was getting loaded when I was coming to induction, and everybody knew it. Everybody did that, as far as I knew. And I was, you know, because I could sit there and smile while they were talking to me and asking me and grilling me and asking me, and I just, yeah, okay. And they knew I was baked. So he couldn't figure that out. So once in fact, they did it twice. Once they figured out that I wasn't lying, they said, okay. And because, you know, I was controlling $10,000 a day cash in these stores, and in one store. And they were kind of worried about that. So got through all that, and after 9 years with that company, never had a problem. And I just kept my head down and I worked my ass off, because in retail, you don't have a whole lot of other choices. And it's 24/7, never stops in convenience stores. So I was able to follow that philosophy, and it worked for me. So I'm kind of retired right now. I'm not working. I'm thinking about opening a business and just working on bikes, because that's what I like to do. And we spend all our time doing that. So we got to this point because of this place. And all of the people that are not even with us anymore, and some of the people that are, I miss them terribly. It's been 42 years. It makes you look at yourself in an honest way. It makes you, if you do it honestly. And I saw the difference between the people that would do it honestly and the people that would not do it honestly. I knew the people that were here jailing. I could tell when somebody was not sincere. Once you know yourself, you can pick out, you know everybody else. There's no secrets. You can talk to somebody for 5 minutes and know whether they're full of shit or not. And there's no trick to that if you know yourself well enough. So if you're determined, like I was, that I was not going to do this twice, I was not coming back here, this was not fun, and there was nothing fun about it. So, you know, you just work. You work all the time. You're either working on yourself, or everything you do is you're working on yourself in one way or another. And then the clinical things that happen, and situations that get set up, and you play little games when you're stupid and you drive. Like we used to stack the slip boxes. It was a situation where Michelle Rose, God rest her soul, she's not with us anymore, but we had a couple of guys that really wanted to get her in a game by herself. So we would arrange it. I would drop a slip on you, you would drop a slip on him, he would drop a slip on him, and the only girl that was ever in that game was Michelle Rose. Poor thing, I don't know if she ever knew that. I love her to death. She was great. But she never had a chance in those games. And she'd always get in there and look around, and she was the only female in this game. And they would just go after her. So, poor thing. But she was tough, man. She was tough. She handled it. She handled it every time. I always admired that. And it made her tough. And she ended up, I think she died in a car wreck in Oklahoma. She was actually shoeing horses. That was what she was doing for a living. She was going around in a truck shoeing horses. And I think she was from Lanikai, her whole family. I remember I met them. She had a sister. They were all great people. They were from England. But people like that, I remember stuff like that. I remember, the stuff that sticks with me. Like that building, that men's dorm we built, I was telling you about it. We had to use a water hose and cut a hole in it to make a level, to level the foundation. That's how we leveled it. And a guy named Lee Supp showed me how to do that. And all these guys were, I was 16, I was running the crew. And I know that was a clinical deal. They were trying to, because I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't talk in the games, I wouldn't say anything. So I guess they were trying to get these guys so mad at me that they would just go after me in games and get me to open up and talk and react, because they couldn't get me to react. And it didn't work because I made friends with all of them. And so they moved me somewhere else, did something else. But that was fun. That was the most fun I ever had, doing that kind of stuff. They would always make me manager or something. I was manager of the commissary. And then me and Arthur Psyche, we had night duty for Expediter. And I had the commissary keys. And back then, there was no food. There was, we were eating P&Js. That's what we were eating most of the time. But there was always some little package of Portuguese sausage and some eggs. And that's what we did. When we were on night duty, we cooked and we ate, because I had the keys to the commissary. So, we were still dope fiends. It's like, there's nothing you can do to completely, you can always rationalize shit, so you have to really be careful. And eventually you realize that that's what you're doing. You can rationalize anything. We can do that. Dope fiends, we can make up reasons to do anything. And eventually you have to stop doing that kind of stuff and understand what you're doing to yourself, and that it's not helping you, it's only hurting you, and it's not going to get you where you want to be. So if you don't have an idea or a picture in your head where you want to be, then that doesn't become important. Once you figure that out, even if it's just being normal, because that was my thing at first. I just wanted to be able to have a job and work and get paid, have a place to live, a house. That's what I wanted. It was simple. I wasn't shooting for the moon, But at that time, it was the moon for me. And it got a little bigger later, but it was always that, basics. Trying to set it up so that you don't fall and you can trick yourself. So you spend a lot of time making sure you're not doing that. I do. Even now, I'm 58, and I have to think about why I'm doing something all the time. I have to always watch it, always question myself, always look at it, and
check the motives, kind of thing.
Yeah, the basics never change. The concepts never change. I have a book, a little hardcover of Emerson's Self-Reliance, always in front of me, always. And I read it as often as I can, and just to keep my head in it, to remind myself. And I don't have the plaques on the wall with the concepts, and I don't have somebody reading it in my ear all the time. There's nobody there to do that. When you're out there, you have to do it yourself. And if you understand it here, you can take it with you. But if you don't, and you're skating or you're jailing and you're fucking around, you're not going to make it, because you can't take that with you. If you think you beat the system, you're not going to make it. So I saw that, and I was lucky enough to see that and understand it. And because I wasn't trying to beat the system. I didn't want to. I was done. When you know how easy you can lose your life, and you understand how fragile that is, then you can protect it. But if you think it has no value to you, you just keep screwing up. I've seen it too many times. People I love. And you can't tell them. It's very frustrating. If they're not ready and they don't understand it, and they're not ready to do that, and make that commitment and make that decision internally, you can't make it for them. You can keep protecting them. As soon as you turn your back, they're going to. So it's sad. But I still love them, even though a lot of them are not with us anymore. Because I learned a lot from them. And